The grand hall of the Intergalactic Council shimmered like a river of glass under starlight. Thousands of species from across galaxies had gathered there, each one a living symbol of their world's pride. Hovering banners projected holographic crests, and the air hummed with quiet tension. This was not just another meeting. It was the day when humanity, the newest member of the Council, would present its first ambassador. They called him Ethan. He was not a warrior, not a noble, and certainly not someone bred for diplomacy among ancient alien bloodlines. But humanity didn't have much of a choice. The other candidates had fallen ill from exposure to alien environments, and Ethan, a quiet engineer stationed on Mars colony, had been the only one who passed every medical compatibility test. Now he stood in the center of the hall, surrounded by beings whose civilizations had existed since before Earth had learned to use fire. The hall quieted when the royal envoy of the Arsalan Empire arrived. Their royal heir, barely 19 by human count, descended the platform with elegance that shimmered like liquid silver. The heir's skin reflected soft shades of violet, their eyes bright like molten crystal. Every movement spoke of a species that had ruled stars for millennia. Whispers passed through the crowd. The Arsalan royal line was known for their pride, their beauty, and their belief that no species was equal to them. The young royal stopped in front of Ethan. Silence settled again. The translator drones floated nearby, ready to interpret every word into thousands of languages. The heir looked at the human, their gaze running from his plain gray suit to his steady but unreadable face. Then, with a voice that sounded both musical and sharp, the royal remarked, "So this is the human they sent?" The words were light, almost casual, yet they carried the weight of mockery. The tone was clear enough that even without translation, everyone understood. Some aliens chuckled softly. Others turned away, unwilling to be seen laughing but too curious to ignore. Humanity's first representative had been insulted in front of the entire council. Ethan didn't move at first. He simply stood there, breathing slowly, looking up at the towering figure before him. The royal tilted their head, expecting a defensive reaction, maybe an apology or perhaps a trembling show of humility. Instead, Ethan said nothing. He didn't even look angry. After a heartbeat that seemed to stretch forever, he turned around and walked away without a single word. Gasps rippled through the hall. No one in history had ever turned their back on an Arsalian royal. The guards stiffened, hands resting on their weapons, unsure whether to act or wait. The royal's smile froze. The human was already at the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silence, and then he was gone. For a few seconds, no one dared to speak. Then the hall burst into noise. Some called it an insult to the council. Others whispered that humans were reckless, arrogant, or even suicidal. The Arsalan heir stood motionless, unable to process what had just happened. The insult had turned back on them in front of the whole galaxy. That moment spread across every communication channel within hours. The image of a young human walking away from the Arsalan heir became a viral symbol. Some saw it as defiance, others as stupidity. But among humans, it became something different. They called it the silent step. It represented dignity, restraint, and quiet confidence. The next day, the council requested Ethan to return for an explanation. Many assumed humanity would apologize. Others believed he would be punished or replaced. But when Ethan walked into the chamber again, the murmurs rose to a low hum. The royal heir was already there, standing beside their advisors, their expression unreadable. The council speaker, a being of shifting light and sound, addressed Ethan. "Ambassador of Earth, your actions yesterday were seen as a violation of decorum. Do you have anything to say before this council decides your status?" Ethan nodded once. "I do," he said calmly. "But before I explain, may I ask the royal heir one question?" The speaker allowed it. The royal folded their arms, curious. "Speak, human," they said softly. Ethan looked at them, his voice steady. "When you remarked on me yesterday, what did you hope to achieve?" The heir blinked, caught off guard. "I wished to test your composure, to see what kind of creature humanity sends to stand among the stars." "And you saw it," Ethan replied. "A creature who does not fight for pride but walks away when respect is gone." The chamber fell silent again. The royal's advisors looked nervous, but the heir didn't reply this time. Their crystal-like eyes flickered with something strange, maybe thought, maybe doubt. The council speaker looked between them, then declared the session paused. When the meeting adjourned, the royal heir approached Ethan privately. No one has ever walked away from me before, they said quietly. Ethan turned slightly. Then maybe it was time someone did. The air studied him, confusion softening into something else, curiosity. You could have spoken. You could have defended your kind. I didn't need to, he said. You already judged us before knowing us. Anything I said would have been just noise. For the first time, the royal smiled, faint and real. You are not like the others. Neither are you, Ethan said before stepping away again. Over the next week, something unexpected began to happen. The royal heir started to appear at meetings where humanity's proposals were discussed. They asked questions, sometimes sharp, sometimes thoughtful. Slowly, their tone changed. When other species mocked Earth's small population or short history, the heir no longer joined in. They began to listen. Human technology fascinated them. Though primitive in many ways, human inventiveness broke every known pattern of logic. While other races followed established laws of science, humans seemed to bend them by instinct. They made engines that should not work, ships that moved faster than their power allowed, and weapons that could adapt mid-battle. It was messy, chaotic, and brilliant. One evening, in a quiet observation chamber overlooking the gas rings of a dying planet, the royal found Ethan again. He was sitting alone, sketching designs for a repair drone on a glass tablet. The heir approached him without guards. You're always working, they said. Don't humans ever rest? Ethan smiled faintly. Resting is easy. Creating something better is harder. The heir tilted their head. Your kind always wants to improve everything. Is it because you think you are incomplete? He paused, then said, Maybe. But that's what makes us who we are. We don't have ancient empires or endless lifespans. We have time, short and fragile, so we make it matter. The royal looked at him quietly. When I first saw you, I thought your kind was small. Now I think maybe that smallness hides something powerful. Ethan nodded. Humility isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is louder than pride. The two began to meet often. Their conversations grew longer, their tones softer. They discussed art, science, history, and what it meant to lead. The royal heir confessed that their empire had grown so old that it no longer remembered what it felt like to strive for something new. Ethan listened and said, Then maybe your people need to see the stars the way we do, not as possessions, but as possibilities. The heir laughed softly. You speak like someone twice your age. Ethan looked out at the stars. When you grow up on a world that almost destroyed itself, you learn fast. Then came the crisis. A rogue fleet from the outer systems attacked a neutral colony near the Council's border. The Arsalan forces were too slow to respond, and the human fleet, small, underpowered, and considered obsolete, was closest. Ethan contacted the royal immediately. We can help, he said. The royal frowned. Your fleet is too small. You will be destroyed. Maybe, Ethan said. But the colony will fall if no one acts. We'll buy time until your ships arrive. The heir stared at him, torn between pride and alarm. You would risk your people for strangers? Ethan met their gaze. We were strangers once, too. Within hours, the human ships launched. They were fragile compared to the sleek cruisers of other species, but they moved with desperate precision. They formed a shield around the colony, intercepting enemy fire, sacrificing hull after hull to keep the civilians safe. When the Arsalan fleet finally arrived, they found the humans still holding the line, engines burning, ships half destroyed but unbroken. When the battle ended, the royal heir boarded the human flagship. The corridor smelled of smoke and metal. Ethan stood there, uniform torn, face streaked with exhaustion. The heir looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, You were right. About what? He asked. Silence, the heir said. It speaks louder than words. Your actions spoke for your entire kind. Ethan gave a tired smile. That's all we wanted, to be seen. The heir stepped closer. You are more than seen, human. You are remembered. Months later, during the next council session, a motion was passed to include humanity in the highest circle of governance. The Arsalan heir was the first to vote in favor. When asked why, they simply said, Because they remind us what it means to begin again. When the session ended, Ethan stood outside the same grand hall where it had all started. The royal heir approached, dressed not in royal armor this time, but in a simple tunic. You changed the way the galaxy sees your kind, they said. Ethan shook his head. No, we just reminded it to look differently. The heir smiled. I never apologized for my remark that day. You didn't need to, he said. It led to this. They stood in silence watching the distant swirl of stars through the glass. Somewhere beyond those lie